Positive psychology, the science of happiness. The theme of humanistic psychology has, as we have seen, the idea that psychologists should study the best of human attributes as well as the worst, the positive characteristics as well as the negative, was reprised in 1998 by APA President Martin Seligman, speaking at a symposium on the science of optimism and hope. Seligman noted that the field's, quote, relentless focus on the negative has left psychology blind to the many instances of growth, mastery, drive, and insight that develop out of undesirable, painful life events, end quote. Sounding not unlike Maslow 30 years earlier, Seligman added, quote, how has it happened that the social sciences view the human strength and virtues, such as altruism, courage, honesty, duty, joy, health, responsibility, and good cheer, as derivative, defensive, or downright illusions, while weakness and negative motivations, anxiety, lust, selfishness, paranoia, anger, disorder, and sadness, are viewed as authentic, end quote. His goal was to persuade psychologists to develop a more positive conception of human nature and human potential that would build on the pioneering work of Maslow and Rogers. And that is Seligman, Steen, Park, and Peterson in 2005. Martin Seligman, born in 1942, and he is still alive and well today, living at the current time in his early 80s. Seligman, who introduced the science of happiness, or positive psychology, into American psychology, thereby precipitating another school of thought, is not a particularly happy guy. Despite his success, he admits that he rarely feels joyful. In 2010, he ranked himself in the lowest 30% of people with positive feelings and emotions. He told a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer newspaper that, quote, a life can be perfectly good and perfectly satisfactory with no positive feeling. My life is largely run around meaning and purpose now, end quote. In an earlier study of college students who scored in the upper 10% of happiness, Seligman said to a reporter for the New York Times that he was not a good candidate for that upper 10%. However, Seligman was quick to point out that there are different kinds of happiness. He finds his deepest level of satisfaction in being fully engaged in work. Seligman's father suffered a severe stroke that left him disabled and almost totally helpless. Seligman was only 13 at the time. The episode left the boy's emotions completely frozen over, as he put it. He said that the ordeal was a real important shadow affecting his entire life. Seligman attended a private military academy at which most of the students came from wealthy upper-class families. He felt like an outsider, aware of the differences between him and the others. As a result, he felt isolated and alone as a boy. A friend reported that Seligman never lost that feeling. I think he still might inwardly struggle with being accepted, quoted Burling in 2010. But Seligman was intelligent enough to be accepted at Princeton University. Then he faced the choice of either graduate school or becoming a professional bridge player. He remains an outstanding bridge player, but chose the University of Pennsylvania, earning his PhD in 1967. He is still there as a faculty member studying what makes people happy. Seligman's call for a positive psychology received an extremely enthusiastic response. Research studies, articles, and books poured forth. Only 3 years after Seligman's 1998 speech to the APA, studies of subjective well-being dealing with the correlates and causes of happiness and other positive emotions had shown the strongest increase in number of publications over the past 40 years. In the year 2000, at the break of the 21st century, the American Psychologist, a leading APA journal, devoted a special issue of nearly 200 pages to positive psychology. The publication focused on happiness, excellence, and optimal human functioning, concepts rarely mentioned in the works of Freud and other psychoanalysts. Also in 2000, the Journal of Happiness Studies began publication, the first such journal in the field. The following year, an issue of American Psychologist included 4 articles on positive psychology. The introduction to this group of articles was titled, Why Positive Psychology is Necessary. In the year 2002, Seligman published a popular book titled Authentic Happiness with the subtitle, Using the New Positive Psychology to Realize Your Potential for Lasting Fulfillment. One review of the book described the positive psychology movement as a whole new age in research psychology. Another magazine put Seligman's picture on its cover and devoted a special issue to his work. At Harvard University in 2005, the most popular undergraduate course with an enrollment of 855 students was Positive Psychology. No other course came close. In 2006, the Journal of Positive Psychology began publication. Thus, in less than 20 years since Seligman's issues his call for a positive psychology, the field became phenomenally successful. The Girl Scouts of America now has a Science of Happiness badge, which members earn by completing a month-long course in strategies and techniques for becoming happy. By 2014, more than 10,000 journal articles were being published annually on the topic. Seminars were held, books published, and popular magazines and television talk shows praised the movement's goals. A Google search for, quote, how to be happy, end quote, generated over 1.8 million hits. Today, textbooks on positive psychology typically cover topics such as subjective well-being, the science of happiness, which is positive psychology, love and life satisfaction, interventions for enhanced well-being, leisure, peak performance, positive affectivity, emotional creativity, optimism, goal setting for life and happiness, and positive psychology on the job. What are the characteristics of a happy personality? What accounts for the state of subjective well-being? Which people are the happiest, and how do they differ from those who are less happy? Did you guess that money makes people happy? Well, yes it can, but only up to a certain point. One survey of 136,000 people in 132 countries found that life satisfaction varied with income. Those who earned more money said they were more satisfied with their lives than those who earned less. However, positive feelings such as joy, happiness, and subjective well-being were less dependent on money and more dependent on such factors as feeling respected, being in control of one's life, and having close friends and family. The primary researcher in that survey wrote that money, quote, makes you more satisfied than it makes you feel good. Positive feelings are less affected by money and more affected by the things people are doing day to day, end quote. These findings seem to support the old adage that money alone does not buy happiness. However, a lack of financial resources and economic insecurity can lead to unhappiness. Even within a multi-million-dollar lottery, results in only a temporary increase in subjective well-being, after which most winners revert to their previous level of happiness. So if you think all you need is a bigger house or a flashier car, think again. Simply accumulating more and showier possessions does not equate with greater happiness. One researcher concluded that the more people endorse materialistic goals, the less happy and satisfied they are with life. Of course, one only need here to remember Stoic philosophy and Epicurean philosophy. Other research shows that high-income people experience greater daily tension and tend to devote less time to relaxation and leisure activities. The activities that higher-income individuals spend relatively more of their time engaged in are associated with no greater happiness on average, but with slightly higher tension and stress. Similar to the relationship between money and well-being, having good health does not automatically guarantee happiness either. Poor health, however, like an inadequate income, can diminish overall life satisfaction. The relationship between age and happiness seems clear. Studies show that subjective well-being improves with age, except among people with serious health problems or physical limitations in old age. A study comparing two groups of adults, an average from ages 31 1968 reported that happiness increases with age, at least up to one's 60s. A survey of 340,000 Americans ages 18 to 35 found that subjective well-being and life satisfaction were high at 18 years of age, fell progressively until about age 50, and then increased to the point where 85-year-olds were more satisfied with their life than they were at 18. However, research on residents of Germany between the ages of 70 and 104 found that happiness declined in extreme old age. A study of nearly 7,000 Americans over a 28-year period study found that subjective well-being, positive feelings, and life satisfaction were all related to longevity. In other words, happier people live longer. Research on older people in Spain found that exercise or other physical activity was strongly and positively related to feelings of happiness and subjective well-being. So therefore, exercise is extremely important for happiness. Of course, not all people are happy when they exercise. Marriage and personality variables are related to a positive approach to life as well. Married people report higher levels of happiness than those who have never married, or who are divorced or widowed. However, a person's level of happiness may depend on the level of happiness of his or her spouse. If one member of the marriage is unhappy, the odds are that the other one will also be unhappy as well. But if one is happy, chances are that the other will also be happy. It has also been found that couples who have no children are happier than those with children, and that happiness drops after the birth of the first child for both husbands and wives, or husbands and husbands, or wives and wives. So, people who score high on measures of subjective well-being are also high in self-efficacy, internal locus of control, a strong desire for control over one's life, self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-determination, extroversion, and conscientiousness. They also score low in neuroticism. What are other factors influencing happiness? African American college students, as well as older African Americans who have experienced discrimination, report lower levels of happiness than those who have not experienced discrimination. Black college students who described a strong sense of identification with and acceptance by the Black community showed higher levels of subjective well-being than those who felt less of an identity with the Black community. A very low correlation has been found between physical attractiveness and happiness. And an analysis of data from 90 countries showed that people who lived in highly developed, urbanized, and industrialized nations were happier and lived longer than those residing in less well-developed nations, or underdeveloped nations, or non-developed nations. Another finding that will be of no surprise is that people with access to the internet report being happier than those with no access. However, these results vary with income level. People with lower incomes report greater life satisfaction as a result of having internet access than do wealthier people. Finally, people who hold full-time jobs report that they are happier on weekends than during the work week. Which comes first, happiness or success? Are happy people more likely to be successful just because they are happy, or are they happy because they are successful? Research indicates that happiness comes first and leads to the kinds of behaviors that can result in success. People high in subjective well-being are more likely to secure job interviews, to be evaluated more positively by supervisors once they obtain a job, to show superior performance and productivity, and to handle managerial jobs better. In 2011, Seligman published a book titled Flourishing, with the subtitle, A Visionary New Understanding of Happiness and Well-Being. He suggests that flourishing is a better word than happiness or well-being to describe people who stand at the top of the happiness scale. This select group, which he says include no more than 10 to 18% of the entire world's population, includes those who not only feel happy but also excel in their relationships and accomplishments, and therefore they are flourishing. But one writer called this idea a new gauge to see what's beyond happiness. Happiness alone, Seligman concludes, is not enough to give life full and deep meaning. To reach this higher level of well-being, or this flourishing, we must cultivate our talents and abilities, establish deep and meaningful relationships with others, and contribute in a positive and constructive way to the world around us. What we formerly called happiness, now termed positive emotion, is but one of 5 components of the flourishing personality. These components include the following, which Seligman lists in 2011. The first is positive emotion, which includes happiness and life satisfaction. The second is engagement. The third is relationships. The fourth is meaning. And the fifth is achievement. So we have positive emotion, which includes happiness and life satisfaction, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. So we cultivate our talents and abilities. We establish deep and meaningful relationships with other people. We contribute in a positive and constructive way to the world around us. And we also have a lot of satisfaction with our achievements. A large-scale survey of 43,000 Europeans in 23 countries found significant differences in the percentage of the population that could be described as flourishing in this regard. The highest level was found in Denmark, which in earlier research consistently scored highest on happiness scales. The next highest levels of flourishing were found in Switzerland, Austria, Finland, and Norway. The lowest levels were reported in Poland, Bulgaria, Ukraine, the Russian Federation, and Portugal. So there again, we have the highest levels of flourishing are found in Denmark, then Switzerland, Austria, Finland, Norway. Lowest levels of happiness, or flourishing rather, are reported in Poland, Bulgaria, Ukraine, the Russian Federation, and Portugal. However, you can have people that are flourishing in those lower levels of, and you can have people that are suffering in the highest levels. So, regardless of whether one is extremely happy in a flourishing nation or a non-flourishing situation, Seligman writes that he intends to extend the concept of flourishing to the workplace, the classroom, and the general culture to bring about an increase in the general level of well-being or flourishing. The United States Army is currently educating more than 1 million soldiers about positive psychology under the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program in an effort to make them less vulnerable to PTSD and other forms of stress. Seligman remains optimistical about the future of positive psychology. He said that, "I believe it is within our capacity that by the year 2051, that 51% of the human population will be flourishing. That is my charge. That is our aim." And he quoted that in 2010. Positive psychology has captured the interest of many psychologists, and many represent the most enduring legacy of the humanistic psychology movement, particularly the work of Abraham Maslow on self-actualization. As for the development of positive psychology as a formal movement or school of thought, Seligman and other positive psychology pioneers have a less structured goal. They say, quote, "We see positive psychology as a mere change in focus for psychology," Seligman wrote, "from the study of some of the worst things in life to the study of what makes life worth living. We do not see positive psychology as a replacement for what has gone before, i.e. older schools of thought in the history of psychology, but just as a supplement and extension." End quote. Some agree with Seligman's early assessments. 2 researchers wrote that the range of topics is now so great that positive psychology can truly be considered a general psychology. A similar judgment was offered by others. The future of positive psychology? Just plain psychology. Whatever the eventual status of positive psychology, it is clearly making a different approach to human nature than what has been proposed by Sigmund Freud, who began the study of personality well over a century ago. A final comment on the psychoanalytic tradition. We have described some of the diversity that arose within the psychoanalytic school during and after Freud's lifetime. Some contemporary positions bear little resemblance to his actual views and can be labeled psychoanalytic only by default to distinguish them from the behavioral experimental traditions in psychology today. Psychoanalysis became much more divided by its revisionist theorists than did behaviorism, And despite the changes introduced by neo-behaviorists, they shared Watson's belief that behavior should remain the focus of study. In contrast, few of Freud's followers agreed that the focus of study should remain on unconscious biological forces, or that people are motivated by sex and aggression alone. The result has been many more subschools of psychoanalysis than of behaviorism. This multitude of viewpoints may be considered a sign of vitality or of weakness. The developments are still history in the making.